Reserve finally did it. They finally raised the federal funds rate by a quarter point, and it's the first rate hike in nearly a decade. And some detractors say it's too little, too late. Let's not talk about Fed policy. Let's talk about how this actually affects our industry. Now, some lenders may know this already, and if you don't, stick around because you need to. And realtors, yes, this is about mortgage, but you also need to know this as your clients, and probably some people in your office even will be saying, oh, interest rates just increased. That's a bummer. Now my buyer's buying power will be reduced. No, it won't. Guys, what happened last week doesn't directly affect mortgage interest rates. It does indirectly, but we won't get into that. The Fed's raising the rate by a quarter point doesn't mean that the 30-year fix just increased, nor the 15-year fix for that matter. Actually, quite the opposite. Mortgage rates stayed low. Let me quickly explain. The Federal Reserve rate is the interest rate at which depository institutions, banks, and credit unions lend reserve balances to other depository institutions overnight on an uncollateralized basis. Now in English, the Fed's raising the Fed rate won't affect mortgage rates, but it will affect short-term money. Car loans, personal loans, credit cards, basically short-term money. Let me say it this way. The interest rate that applies to investors is the Federal Reserve fund rate. This is the cost that banks are charged for borrowing money from the Federal Reserve banks. Why is this so important? It's the way that the Federal Reserve, the Fed, attempts to control inflation by influencing the amount of money available for purchasing goods. The Fed can control inflation. Other countries' central banks do the same thing for the same reason. Basically, by increasing the federal funds rate, the Fed attempts to lower the supply of money by making it more expensive to obtain. See, no direct effect on mortgage rates, so let's all take a deep breath. Doesn't that feel better? Now, I always like to say that the devil's in the details, and this is where it gets really interesting for anybody in the real estate industry. For reals, listen up. While informing the nation of the Fed's fund hike, the Fed snuck this little ditty in, and I quote, "The committee is maintaining its existing policy of reinvesting principal payments from its holdings of agency debt and agency mortgage-backed securities in agency mortgage-backed securities and of rolling over maturing treasury securities at auction, and it anticipates doing so until normalization of the level of the Fed's fund rate is well underway." Now, again in English, when U.S. financial markets crashed back in 2008, the Federal Reserve began buying billions of dollars worth of agency mortgage-backed securities, loans backed by Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac, and Ginnie Mae. This was in an effort to keep mortgage rates low, and it worked, and it still is working today. The Fed gradually stopped using new money to buy mortgage-backed securities, but continued to reinvest money it made from the bonds it had into more newer bonds. In other words, all the income they received from all the mortgage-backed securities they bought is going right back into buying more mortgage-backed securities, which is what's really keeping mortgage rates low today. And we've talked about this several times. Now for the kicker. The amount of money being spent by the Fed is staggering, and even more staggering is their market share of mortgage-backed securities. Over the past few cycles, it's been about $26 billion a month. A month, guys. That's $26 billion of downward pressure being applied to interest rates, and that accounts for nearly every newly originated mortgage-backed security. So basically, if the Fed wasn't spending $26 billion to buy our own debt, rates would be much higher. So I guess the real question for all of us in the industry is, how long can the Fed keep their spending spree going? Because if they don't, that will be the real impact on mortgage rates, not a quarter point Fed funds rate hike. Yikes! Talk about the man behind the curtain. Well, whether you agree with the policy or not, you're enjoying super low rates for your clients for the time being. And now when your clients ask you about the Fed rate hike, you can tell them what it's really about, and that makes you a better real estate professional. I hope you guys all enjoyed this and learned a little something today. Feel free to share it and repost today's show. Show this at your next sales meeting so we all can be edified, and we will see you guys next week.